For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Sashnee Moodley. Researcher and analyst Professor Raymond Suttner joins me for Suttner's View, a weekly commentary on South Africa's political scene. Welcome, Professor.
Thank you.
What did you think of the cabinet reshuffle?
Well, I haven't had a lot of time to take it in, and I actually don't know some of these people who have been made deputy ministers. Maybe I don't know some of the ministers either. And I think that is quite significant in the sense that you have seen the removal of a number of ministers who, I think it was Mantashe who said it when I was driving here, who were performing very well, the economic categories of ministers. And you have seen some ministers who have been performing very badly, like Mutambe and Dlamini, remaining in their positions or being moved to another, and Nathi Nhleko is also being kept in the cabinet. So I don't know exactly who's who, and I'm also very concerned when something very dramatic happens. One should not respond dramatically. One should try to understand what is the context, have the listeners, the viewers, understand how did this come about, what was at stake. And I think the real issue at the center of all of this has been the question of the finance ministry. And I think the reason why the finance ministry is important is that South Africa is a very vulnerable economy. It doesn't get a lot of foreign investment. Most of the investment that it gets is hot money. So it's very important to have a stable image surrounding the Treasury and surrounding government in general. Because we saw after the firing of Nene, and we can already see it now, that the rand fell dramatically, and also the possibility of a downgrade arose. Effectively, South Africa has been downgraded in many ways because many lenders already factor in the risk that they attach to the South African government. But a formal downgrade would be a very serious thing, which takes you a long time to get back to out of junk status. But it would also have effect on the region as a whole, on the economies as a whole. It would also lead to a flood of more migrants into South Africa and more pressure on social services, which are already hard to fund. Now, in the context of post-apartheid South Africa, the ANC had in mind various transformational goals. But when it was unbanned in 1990, there were already processes underway which changed the character of the world. It became a unipolar world, and it was not possible to get the level of support, to count on the level of support that it had previously got from the Soviet Union and a number of other states. And in consequence, in the early years after apartheid, a number of things were done in order to create the image of continuity and stability as far as macroeconomic policy was concerned. You may recall that the first two ministers, the ministers of finance that Mandela appointed, were not ANC people. It was only after about 3-4 years that Trevor Manuel, there was first Derek Keyes, then there was Chris Liebenberg, and those were efforts to calm the markets. I don't like this thing that the markets dictate to us what we do, rating agents tell us what we must do, but the fact of the matter is that this new government inherited a huge debt and had to act in a manner that safeguarded the fiscus. Now, in that context, the gear policy, personally I had my problems with gear, but I did understand that gear was an attempt to stabilize the economy, to create a sense that this was an economy that was managed in a way that was not reckless. Now, some people from the left criticized this, saying that low deficit and low inflation are not always good for a developmental path and for transformation, because sometimes you need that money from a debt in order to invest in processes that will kickstart the economy and get it to create more jobs and so forth and so on. That's you can find not in Marx, but in someone like Keynes. Now, those processes came under criticism from the left, and when Zuma came to power, it was said that they're going to do away with the class project of 1996, the gear-type macroeconomic policy. But in fact, under the finance ministry of Gordon and Nene, there's actually been continuity. And I think the reasoning behind people supporting the idea of keeping Gordon in the finance ministry is the first job of the Treasury is to safeguard the resources of the country, to see that that money is not spent in an unauthorized manner or pillaged, or that when there's procurement, that procurement is done according to processes that are regular, so that we do not lose as a country as a result of irregular processes. Now, we know from lots of media reports that Zuma has himself formed relationships with a number of people who have sought to benefit from his presidency through getting contracts which have been alleged and sometimes found to be irregular, and Treasury, as far as possible, has stood in the way of allowing certain contracts in regard to Eskom, in regard to SAA, in regard to Denel, in regard to a whole lot of other entities. The Treasury has stood there and been an obstacle against pillage. And I think the real reason for the desire to remove Gordhan has been in order to open the way to end the blockage of access to resources on an unauthorized basis. We must remember that Gordhan might be quite relieved now, because for a long time he's had the hawks hovering over him. He's got the NPA saying only yesterday that in Parliament that the so-called rogue unit of SARS case is still being investigated. So they've been trying to find a way of charging him, which they did, and they had to withdraw last year. A lot of irregularities attached to that. A complete uprooting of the capacity of the top personnel of SARS has occurred. The SARS commissioner has refused to report to his minister, which is Minister of Finance, Pravin Gordhan. So there's been a whole lot of things happening, and Gordhan has been seen as an obstacle. Now, what they have done, no one has said that Gordhan and Jonas, by the way, we know was offered these, allegedly offered these millions if he became Minister of Finance. Now, no one has suggested that there's anything wrong with the competence of Gordhan or Jonas. No one has questioned the competence of Davies or Patel in their portfolios. And it seems to me that what they have done is they've used this opportunity to remove people who have performed well, but they also removed one or two who have not performed well. And I think it spells dangers for our economy. It may mean there's a court case now where the Minister of Finance is acting against the Guptas will the Minister of Finance remain there? There's a number of things the Minister of Finance has refused to sign. Will it now be signed? Will there be the same meticulousness with which the Treasury performs its role? Or will this open the floodgates for something else to happen? I don't want to comment on the new minister. It may well be that the fears that are raised and the way he's being characterized by some people are unwarranted. But the reason why Gordhan was removed was not in order to secure good governance. And I think we have good reason to fear.
Now, what does this mean for the country?
Well, you know, taken together with the Kathrada funeral, where people expressed their repugnance at the idea of Zuma continuing to be president of the country, this seems to me to indicate that Zuma is showing that he owes no accountability to anyone. He called in the top 6 of the ANC, and according to Mantashe, I heard while I was driving here, he just gave them a list. He didn't consult them. Now on Monday, apparently, he had another meeting with the top 6, and they indicate, he made it very clear that he was going to get rid of Gordhan, but they said, just don't bring in Brian Molefe. And there was some sort of consultation then. But yesterday, according to Mantashe, they were presented with a list, and he doesn't know where that list comes from. That was not explained to them, and it was within the prerogative of the president to appoint the minister. But what he is showing is that he has no concern for the views, not just of some opponents of his, but for his top 5 other officials within the ANC. So that I think it is a new phase. It may not be a sign of strength. We don't know, because we must remember that outrage doesn't necessarily translate into organizational forces that will remove the current president and put someone else there who will see the country live happily ever after. We don't really have, we can't really see the ANC as having been a consistent force for democratic clean government. Only a year ago, before the Nkandla judgment, they were endorsing and providing strong arguments for it, so that people may not be able to rely on the ANC, but forces outside the ANC are scattered, they are not organized, they have different views. Some want to go back to a golden age of the ANC, some are right outside the ANC. My belief is it's important for all of us who want clean government, who want the rule of law, whether we are from the poorest of the poor or the richest of the rich, whether we are in professions, in faith-based organizations, whether we are youth or elderly, to try and find a way to develop a platform for recovering the democratic promise that has been squandered at this stage.
Thank you, Professor. That was Professor Raymond Suttner speaking to Creamer Media's Polity about Zuma's cabinet reshuffle.